What happens when a polarizing conservative voice walks into the lion's den of daytime television? And what happens when that lion, Whoopi Goldberg, is ready to pounce? What unfolded next wasn't just a TV moment, it was a cultural earthquake. The View studio that morning was humming with a strange electric energy. Stagehands whispered more than usual, producers peeked around corners, and even the audience, mostly composed of loyal daytime fans, seemed to feel the undercurrent. The guest list had been teased for days. Controversial commentator Matt Walsh joins us live, they'd announced, promising a no-holds-barred discussion on gender, politics, and free speech. The air conditioning buzzed, but the set felt warm, tight, almost claustrophobic. Whoopi, Sunny Hostin, and Joy Behar sat already armed, not with coffee mugs, but with bullet points, eye rolls waiting to be deployed. When Matt Walsh finally entered the studio, the applause was measured. Polite, a little forced. He wore a tailored blazer over a black button-down, sleeves rolled, beard trimmed to precision. His body language said calm, but his eyes scanned the set like a man walking into enemy territory. Whoopi's smile was thin, a line drawn in diplomacy rather than warmth. "Matt Walsh is with us today," she said, voice teetering between welcome and warning. They shook hands, but even that gesture was ice-coated. The show went live seconds later and viewers at home saw only smiles. But inside the studio, something darker was already stirring beneath the surface, something both sides knew couldn't stay buried for long. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, don't forget to subscribe for more stories the mainstream won't touch. And drop a comment below. Was this clash inevitable, or did someone go too far? Trust me, you're going to want to witness every second of what comes next. From the first exchange, it was clear this wasn't going to be a cordial sit-down. As the cameras rolled, Whoopi leaned in with her signature blend of sarcasm and steel. "So, Matt," she began, her tone dipped in condescension, "you've said some things that have stirred the pot." The audience chuckled nervously. Matt didn't flinch. He nodded slowly, his hands folded, the calm before the storm. "I don't stir the pot," he said flatly. "I just don't lie to people." The table grew quieter. Joy's eyebrows lifted. Sunny Hostin blinked twice. Already the air was changing. Walsh was given 30 seconds, maybe less, before the panel pounced. The topic was gender identity, and Whoopi wasted no time steering the conversation straight into controversy. "You don't believe trans women are women. That's your stance, correct?" Her voice was sharp, her phrasing surgical. Walsh's reply was measured, clinical. "No, I believe biology is real. Words matter." The audience let out a collective murmur. And there it was. The collision course. He wasn't backing down, and neither was she. Behind the scenes, producers hovered near the control booth, fingers twitching over the commercial break button. Joy Behar smirked, arms crossed. "You know, we try to keep things civil here." Walsh tilted his head slightly. "Do you?" The line landed like a slap. A few people in the crowd gasped audibly. Sunny Hostin interjected, attempting to pivot to a question about Walsh's recent documentary. But the tension had already detonated. The smiles around the table had hardened into masks. This wasn't an interview. It was a showdown, televised, live, and cracking at the seams. What none of them knew yet was just how far off the rails things were about to go. It was Sunny who lit the match, whether she meant to or not. "Matt, what do you say to people who just want to be called by the pronouns they identify with?" she asked, voice coated in civility. Matt didn't hesitate. "I say you can't demand I lie for your comfort," he replied. That single sentence dropped like a grenade. Whoopi's face twitched. Joy inhaled through her teeth. The crowd stirred, unsure whether to cheer or recoil. The line between respectful discourse and personal offense had just been crossed, and nobody was quite sure who stepped over it first. Whoopi leaned forward, her voice lower now, more dangerous. "You think it's lying to respect someone's identity?" Matt didn't blink. "I think it's lying to pretend biology doesn't matter. If we're redefining reality based on feelings, where does it stop?" The studio lights suddenly seemed hotter. The audience murmured again, some clapping, others audibly groaning. You could almost hear the control room heartbeat, editors twitching, producers mouthing, "Not yet." A camera panned to Whoopi's clenched jaw. Whatever veneer of patience remained was cracking under pressure. Walsh wasn't looking to win over the room. He was there to draw a line in the sand. And it was working. Whoopi leaned back slowly, as if deciding how far she was willing to go on live television. "You think you're brave, Matt?" she said with a tight smile. "You're not saying anything new, just the same tired attacks that put lives at risk." That sentence silenced the room. A few audience members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Matt stared back, unflinching. "And pretending truth doesn't exist helps no one," he said. It wasn't just a disagreement anymore, it was war. There are moments on live television when even the audience forgets to breathe. This was one of them. After Matt's blunt assertion about truth and biology, Whoopi stared at him with a silence so cold it felt weaponized. The panel wasn't just stunned, they were furious. But they hadn't expected him to say it so plainly, so unflinchingly, in a space built for applause and affirmation. "So you're saying millions of people are just delusional?" Joy finally broke the pause, her voice tight, her words clipped. Walsh nodded. "If you're asking whether feelings override facts, yes. That's exactly what I'm saying." The crowd rippled. Some clapped out of defiance, others booed with equal volume. It wasn't clear who was in control anymore: the hosts, the guest, or the mob watching from the wings. Whoopi turned slightly in her chair, not to face Matt, but to look directly into the camera. "Let me be really clear here," she said, voice firm. "This show supports the LGBTQ community. Always has, always will." Applause, but Matt didn't flinch. "Supporting someone doesn't mean surrendering reality," he said. No smile, no backpedaling, just a cold, unwavering stare. Behind the scenes, a floor manager leaned toward the director. "Do we cut to commercial?" The reply was a grim shake of the head. Not yet. Not while the ratings spike was rising like steam from the stage. On camera, Whoopi shifted her body toward Matt again. This time, there was no smile, no attempt at politeness. Just a quiet rage beginning to surface. "You know what I think?" she asked. He raised his eyebrows, waiting. "I think you're more interested in being right than being kind." The audience roared, but no one noticed that Matt was still smiling. Whoopi leaned in, elbows on the table, eyes narrowed. The camera framed her like a judge preparing a verdict. "See, Matt," she began, voice slow and deliberate. "When you come on this show and talk like that, you're not just sharing an opinion. You're dismissing people's existence." Her words were sharp but controlled. The audience erupted in applause, sensing a shift. But Matt didn't flinch. "No," he said. "I'm dismissing a dangerous idea. That's not the same thing as dismissing a person." It was the kind of hairline distinction that satisfied no one and ignited everyone. Joy Behar jumped in before the applause could settle. "Do you even understand what it's like to be marginalized?" she snapped. "To have your identity constantly debated by people who have never lived your life?" Walsh turned his head slowly toward her. "I understand what it's like to be told I can't speak because I disagree." A few claps echoed from the audience, fewer than before, but louder. The crowd was no longer unified. It had become tribal. Gasps and jeers intertwined. A woman in the front row shook her head, mouthing the word disgusting. Another behind her clapped defiantly. Whoopi sensed it too. The balance of power in the room was shifting, and it made her more dangerous. "You want to talk about truth, Matt?" she asked, her voice rising. "Here's the truth. Kids are taking their lives because of rhetoric like yours. You call that honesty?" That line hit hard. The studio fell into an awful silence, one not even the applause sign could pierce. Matt leaned forward just an inch. "Then maybe we should stop lying to them," he said. It wasn't just a response, it was a dare. And it echoed long after the cameras kept rolling. From the control booth, the view was chaos. Red lights blinking, sound text frozen. and a director with one hand on the commercial bumper and the other gripping the edge of his console like a lifeline. "He's not backing down," someone whispered. "Neither is she." On set, Whoopi and Matt were locked in a stare-down that wasn't made for daytime TV. The audience sat rigid, unsure whether to cheer, scream, or bolt for the exit. And behind the scenes, the producer finally broke. "Go to break," he barked, but they were already 10 seconds too late. The screen faded to black with the network's jingle trailing awkwardly behind it. Cameras cut, microphones muted, except Matt's wasn't. "So this is the part where you silence people?" he said under his breath, audible only to the crew and the hosts, but enough to send another jolt through the room. Whoopi stood up, pushing back from the table. "You came here for a fight, you got one," she muttered, stepping off set. A stagehand rushed in to reapply her makeup. Joy leaned over to a producer, whispering something that made him pale. Even Sunny sat speechless, scrolling through her notes like they might offer an escape route. Meanwhile, Matt remained seated. Calm, composed, hands folded. A production assistant approached cautiously with a water bottle. "You good?" she asked, not looking him in the eye. "I'm fine," he said. "Are they?" The question lingered like smoke. Backstage, one of the junior editors turned to another. "This is either a train wreck or a ratings goldmine." The other one nodded. "Probably both." They had 90 seconds until airtime resumed. 90 seconds to decide whether they were running a show or letting one implode in real time. Behind the cameras, the hallway buzzed with an energy that felt less like showbiz and more like crisis control. A junior producer paced outside the dressing rooms, phone pressed to one ear, mouthing silent curses between updates to a network executive. "No, he hasn't left. No, Whoopi's still off set. Yes, we're live in 30. Inside the control room, someone muttered, "This isn't a segment anymore, it's a story." Technicians exchanged glances. Everyone knew what was happening, and no one wanted to be the one holding the detonator when the lights came back on. Backstage, a makeup artist hovered near Whoopi, dabbing at her temple while she fumed silently. "He's not just wrong," she whispered to no one in particular. "He's dangerous." Across the corridor, Matt Walsh stood alone by the craft table, untouched coffee cooling beside him. His assistant, a thin man in thick glasses, stepped in close. "We can leave now," he said quietly. Matt shook his head. "They invited me. They don't get to shut the door just because they don't like what I brought." The assistant hesitated, then stepped back, watching the set as if it might burst into flames. Two stagehands loitered near the curtain, whispering in hushed tones. "You think he'll get escorted out?" one asked. The other shrugged. "Not unless he throws a punch, and even then..." A monitor nearby showed the countdown clock. 0:00:13. Someone called out, "Back in 10!" And the crew snapped into motion like soldiers prepping for combat. The view was coming back live, but the script was irrelevant now. The audience wasn't waiting for talking points. They were waiting for the fallout. And no one, not the hosts, not the guest, not the network, knew what was about to happen next. When the cameras came back on, the set looked the same, but the mood was unmistakably darker. Whoopi was back in her chair, stone-faced. Matt hadn't moved. The co-hosts shifted stiffly, their notes now props rather than tools. A beat of silence passed before Whoopi finally spoke, her voice deceptively calm. "We're back. And if you're just joining us, we're having a conversation, if you can call it that." The audience chuckled weakly. Matt turned slightly toward her, his voice clear and steady. "If we're being honest, it hasn't really been a conversation. It's been a lecture with backup singers." The jab landed. Even Joy's jaw clenched. "You think you're some kind of truth teller?" she snapped. "You came here knowing exactly what you wanted. To pick a fight and play victim when people push back." Walsh didn't blink. I came here expecting disagreement. What I didn't expect was for your definition of discussion to mean shut up and comply." That was it. The illusion of civility shattered. Whoopi tossed her note cards onto the table. "Enough," she said. "We don't bring people on this show so they can spew hate and call it truth." The crowd roared in support, but it was more mob than audience now. In the control booth, the director whispered, "Let it play." Ratings were climbing. Back on stage, Sonny tried to regain control. "Let's talk about facts then, Matt. What qualifies you to speak on these issues?" Walsh gave a faint smile. "What qualifies anyone at this table?" The words echoed, cutting sharper than any insult. Whoopi stood again. Not storming out this time, but rising like a warning bell. She looked down at him and said, "You may think you're fearless, but what you are is finished here." The cameras caught every second, and still Matt refused to look away. It was Sonny who tried to pivot again, desperate to wrest the conversation back into safer waters. "Matt, let's switch gears. You've said before that your beliefs stem from your religious convictions. Do you think that gives you license to dictate how others live?" It was a trap dressed as a question, and Walsh saw it coming. "I don't dictate anything," he replied coolly, "but I also don't apologize for believing in objective truth. My convictions don't vanish just because I walked onto a soundstage." The crowd murmured, some approving, some seething. The panel braced. They knew what was coming. Whoopi cut in fast. "Oh, here we go," she snapped. "You want to turn this into a sermon now? We're not here for Bible study." The tension snapped back to high alert. Matt stayed composed, but his voice took on a sharper edge. "You brought up my motivations. You don't get to mock them just because they make you uncomfortable." Joy shook her head. "You want to use faith as a shield while you push judgment. That's not conviction, it's arrogance." The audience burst into applause, but it wasn't celebration, it was combat, and the lines were being drawn deeper. Matt leaned forward, voice low but pointed. "Believing in right and wrong isn't arrogance. Pretending there's no such thing, that's the lie." Silence fell again, heavy and sudden. Whoopi took a long breath. "You don't get to weaponize God on this show. Not when people are dying because of what you call truth." For a split second, even the crew paused. Something deeper had been struck. Something more volatile than politics, or gender, or fame. Faith had entered the battlefield. And when it did, it stopped being just a talk show segment. It became something far more dangerous. Joy Behar was done holding back. Her tone, once playful and pointed, now snapped like a whip. "You know what, Matt?" she said, eyes flashing. "You hide behind truth and God like a coward. But you're not brave. You're a bully with a vocabulary." The audience erupted, a mix of claps and gasps. Matt turned his head slowly, face calm, voice icy. "I came here to have a conversation. You came here to scream slogans and score applause." The crowd shifted. Some cheered louder. Others crossed their arms. It wasn't just divisive now, it was personal. Joy wasn't finished. "You think you're some moral compass?" she barked. "You peddle shame. You call it clarity. But you're just another guy telling women and kids how to live like it's 1952. Matt leaned back in his chair. "Truth doesn't expire because it's inconvenient," he said flatly. "And just because something offends you doesn't mean it's wrong." That line sparked another wave from the audience, louder, more frenzied. One woman shouted, "Say it louder!" Another yelled, "Get him off!" Security inched forward near the stage, not acting yet but ready. The tension stretched to its breaking point. Whoopi was stone silent now, arms folded, watching Matt like a hawk. Joy's voice cracked, not from weakness, but fury. "You sit there calm as a stone while people suffer under the weight of your words." Matt didn't flinch. "That's because you mistake disagreement for cruelty. But sometimes the kindest thing you can do is tell the truth." Another gasp, another division in the crowd. The line wasn't just drawn, it was deepening with every syllable. And Joy had just crossed it, dragging the entire show behind her. For a brief, eerie moment, Matt Walsh said nothing. The storm had raged around him, accusations, outrage, demands for removal. But he sat still, hands clasped on the table, breathing steady. That silence unnerved the room more than anything he had said. It wasn't retreat, it was restraint. And it was about to shatter. Whoopi finally broke it. "You want to be a martyr, Matt? Is that what this is?" she asked, voice dripping in contempt. You came here to be dragged so you could cry censorship. Matt looked up, eyes cold. No, he replied. I came here expecting you to act like professionals. Clearly, I misjudged. The insult was clinical, but its impact was nuclear. Joy stood. That's it, she snapped, voice raised. Get him out of here. Security guards along the wall stiffened. The audience roared, some in support, others in protest. Whoopi stayed seated, but her glare burned. You came here to provoke, and now you're shocked people are angry, she spat. You don't get to hide behind free speech when you're spewing poison. Matt's jaw tightened, and then he leaned forward, just slightly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult anyone. I answered your questions. You just didn't like the answers. That was the matchstick. A producer stepped onto the edge of the stage, speaking urgently into a headset. Security moved toward Matt. One co-host muttered something off mic. The audience was on its feet now, some shouting, some recording. And Matt? He stood up, slowly, deliberately. If you want me gone, he said, voice steady, then say it out loud. Don't hide behind the outrage and applause signs. Own it. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't posturing, but the ground beneath the show cracked wide open. And in that moment, the last thread of control snapped. The first guard didn't rush, he just took a single step, enough to draw Matt Walsh's attention without touching him. Sir, he said, low and firm, we're going to need you to come with us. Matt didn't move. So, this is what the view is now? He asked, glancing at the crowd. Silence, dissent, parade outrage, then have the bouncers do the cleanup? Whoopi stood. That was her line. No, she said, voice sharp. This is what happens when you confuse bigotry for bravery. There's the doormat, take it. The crowd surged with noise, shouts of, get him off, clashing with, let him speak. Audience members rose to their feet, a wave of divided fury. One woman in the second row shouted, you invited him. Another fired back, he's poisoning our kids. Security took another step, still cautious, still waiting. Matt's face stayed calm, but his voice grew more pointed. I came here because I was asked. I'm leaving because I told the truth. That line pierced through the noise like a blade. The set was no longer a stage. It was a battlefield. Off camera, producers barked into earpieces. One waved frantically toward the booth, signaling for another break. But the director hesitated. The moment was too raw, too powerful. This wasn't just television, it was live cultural surgery. And Matt Walsh stood at the center of it, unmoved, unafraid, and unwilling to soften a single word. The security guard, now inches away, waited for a command that no one seemed ready to give. Because something wasn't just breaking, it already had. The moment Matt rose to his feet, the temperature in the room dropped. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't raise a hand, but the gesture alone ignited a chain reaction across the set. Whoopi's eyes locked on him like a hawk. Joy Behar stepped backward, crossing her arms tightly as if bracing for impact. Security tensed. The audience fell into a strange, buzzing silence. Part anticipation, part disbelief. This was no longer about debate. This was personal and irreversible. Matt turned toward Whoopi first. You invited me on a show called The View, he said, voice steady. But it seems there's only room for yours. He shifted toward the audience. This isn't courage, he added, gesturing to the stage. It's performance. And you all just watch the script run out. A chorus of voices rose in protest, but others, shockingly, applauded. In the back, someone shouted, "Let him finish!" But that was no longer an option. The control room had already made the call. A red light above camera 3 flicked off. The feed had gone dark. Producers emerged from the wings, swarming the stage like emergency responders. The lead floor manager whispered to the guards, who began ushering Matt toward the exit. Not dragging him, not forcing, but moving with a firm inevitability. Walsh didn't resist. He looked over his shoulder once, back at the co-hosts who now sat in a stunned semicircle. You don't have to agree with me, he said. But pretending your feelings are facts doesn't make them so. The camera wasn't live anymore, but every phone in the audience was, and Matt Walsh's final words were already echoing far beyond the studio. The moment security reached the studio doors, Matt Walsh was no longer a guest. He was a headline. "This is a disgrace!" someone in the crowd shouted as he was escorted out. Others clapped louder than ever, trying to drown out the dissent. Joy Behar, still seated, exhaled heavily, muttering off mic, "Should have never booked him." Whoopi didn't respond. Her silence said more than 1,000 words. The View wasn't a stage anymore, it was scorched earth. Outside the frame, chaos erupted. Crew scrambled to re-cue the segment. A panicked associate producer shouted toward the booth, "We need filler, go to pre-recorded." But the damage was already done. Clips from audience phones were flooding social media within seconds, unfiltered, unedited, undeniable. Matt's final words, captured on dozens of shaky screens, ricocheted across the internet before the show even returned from break. Hashtags were already trending. Walsh on The View, kicked off live, Haas View meltdown. Backstage, Matt's assistant caught up with him as they exited through the side corridor. "You sure you're okay?" he asked. Walsh didn't stop walking. "Better than ever," he replied. He wasn't angry, he wasn't shaken. He looked like a man who had said exactly what he came to say and knew the fallout would only amplify his voice. Meanwhile, back on set, Whoopi faced the camera once more, sighing as she tried to reset the mood. But everyone knew the show had already split in two, before and after the moment Matt Walsh was kicked off The View. When the broadcast resumed, the energy was off. The audience clapped half-heartedly, their faces still flushed from what they had witnessed. Whoopi shuffled her notes, trying to regain composure, but her voice trembled slightly when she spoke. "We're back," she said, "and we're moving on." But no one was moving on, not in the room, not online, not anywhere. The next guest sat awkwardly off stage, unsure if they should even step into the blast zone. Meanwhile, on social media, the storm had already reached full force. Behind the scenes, chaos reigned. Producers argued over damage control while assistants sprinted between departments. A junior staffer tried to scrub the unaired footage, but it was too late. Every second had already gone viral from audience phones. Screens lit up across the building, showing split-screen edits of Walsh's final statement and Whoopi's reaction. ABC executives were on a conference call within minutes, demanding an official statement. "Control the narrative," one ordered. "Spin it before he does." But Walsh didn't need to spin anything. The internet was doing it for him. Outside the studio, reporters had already gathered, tipped off mid-show. When Matt exited through the side door, flanked by security and his assistant, microphones flew toward him. "Do you regret what happened in there?" one shouted. Walsh paused, looked directly into a lens and said, "I regret nothing. They invited a conversation. I gave them one." Then he walked away as the shutter clicks and flashing lights chased him into the street. Back inside, The View struggled to move forward, but the story had already left the building and it wasn't going quietly. Within 20 minutes, the internet was on fire. Twitter became a battleground. Hashtags like #Walsh versus Whoopi and #View ambush surged to the top of trending. Celebrities chimed in, each tweet sharper than the last. Conservative commentators praised Matt Walsh for saying what no one else dares on live TV. Meanwhile, progressive voices blasted him as dangerous, deliberately provocative, and an agent of chaos. The echo chambers weren't just talking, they were screaming. A viral clip of Matt calmly standing up while Whoopi seethed had already hit 2 million views. News outlets jumped on it like wildfire. Headlines range from "Matt Walsh sparks firestorm on The View" to "Daytime talk show implodes live on air." Fox News replayed the segment on loop, calling it a victory for truth. Meanwhile, The View's own social channels were flooded with thousands of comments, some demanding an apology from the show, others calling for Walsh to be banned from all future programming. The line between entertainment and activism had once again collapsed. Then the endorsements started. Prominent podcasters, YouTubers, and politicians from both sides weighed in. Some labeled it a calculated stunt by The View to bait controversy for ratings. Others accused Walsh of deliberately provoking a scene for clout. But neither side could deny one thing: it worked. Everyone was watching, everyone was talking. And in a media landscape fueled by outrage, both The View and Matt Walsh had just gone nuclear. The only question left: who would detonate next. Inside ABC's Manhattan headquarters, the fallout ignited alarms on every floor. Senior executives gathered in a glass-walled conference room, the confrontation playing on muted loop behind them. One slammed a folder shut. "We can't air the uncut version," he snapped. "It'll set the building on fire." Another exec countered, "It's already out there." Trying to hide it makes us look worse. The tension wasn't about morality, it was about optics. Damage control or double down. Either way, they knew this moment would define more than just a rating cycle. The legal team issued a terse internal memo. Avoid commentary. Let the segment speak for itself. Meanwhile, the PR department drafted 3 versions of a statement. One apologizing to viewers, one defending the hosts, and one avoiding any position at all. The problem was, none of them were good enough. Network advertisers were already calling. Half were furious at the spectacle, the other half thrilled by the viewership spike. "They're not upset about the fight," one exec said. "They're upset they weren't prepared for it." Back on the View set, the atmosphere was drained and raw. Crew members avoided eye contact. Whoopi stayed behind, quiet but unshaken. Joy sat in her dressing room, scrolling through headlines. "It's going to get worse before it gets better," she muttered. She wasn't wrong. The network faced a decision it couldn't delay. Issue a public stance and risk alienating half the country, or remain silent and be devoured by both sides. One thing was certain, this wasn't just a controversy, it was a crossroads. In the days that followed, opinion pieces flooded every major outlet. Some painted Walsh as a provocateur who came to bait outrage for clicks. Others portrayed him as a martyr for free speech, dragged off set for saying what many were afraid to. The View's co-hosts issued a brief, heavily vetted statement. "We welcome diverse voices, but not at the expense of respect." It satisfied no one. Viewers didn't want a safe press release. They wanted clarity, or confrontation, or closure. And they got none. Walsh, meanwhile, capitalized. He released a video titled "What Really Happened on The View" that racked up millions of views within hours. "They asked for my voice," he said on camera. "They just didn't expect it to be louder than theirs." He toured podcasts, radio shows, even hinting at legal action, but more than that, he shaped the narrative. It wasn't the View's show anymore, it was his. And no PR team, no network executive, no co-host apology could take that back. So what do you think? Was Matt Walsh justified, or did The View just ask the wrong question? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit that subscribe button, and tell me who you want covered next. Because this isn't the first time daytime TV became a battleground, and something tells me it won't be the last.